Yes? Can we get the microphone? Okay, it's working. Hello, good morning. Can we please kindly ask everyone to take their seats? Okay, and I think we are ready to start. Good morning, everyone. Are we live as well? Yes, perfect. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Flipping Perspectives, Maximizing Exchange conference of the Creative Flip project. My name is Dubravka Jurisic. I am the project manager of Creative Flip at the Goethe Institute Brussels, and it's really my pleasure to be your moderator today for this conference. Thank you all very much for joining us in such a large number in person after such a long time. I think everyone was very excited to be able to see faces once again, familiar and new, and that's why we are very late, a bit late. So I'm really sorry to the audience who's watching us online on YouTube. I would just like to also thank them for joining us as well. Today we are gathered here to discuss the future perspectives of the culture and creative sector, to reflect back on the effects of the pandemic, but also to discuss how we can bounce forward for the future of the cultural creative sector. And in this morning, we have an array of wonderful speakers who will welcome you to this conference and open this event. And it's really my pleasure to first greet Ms. Sabine Verheyen, who is a member of the European Parliament and chair of the Committee for Culture and Education at the European Parliament. She will be joining us online, and I would just like to check if we can have Ms. Verheyen online.
I'm here.
Perfect.
Do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you really well. Sorry, there was a bit of an echo, that's why it's resonating a little bit, but I think everything will be now perfect. Yes, okay, now we also see you, so this is perfect. Hello and welcome. It's really a pleasure to have you with us today, especially because Creative Flip is a pilot project of the European Parliament, starting already since 2019 and continuing now as a preparatory action. So it's really a pleasure to have a member of the European Parliament today here with us. And now I give you the floor to give your opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends from Creative Flip, dear participants, I'm very happy that you have invited me as chair of the Committee on Culture and Education in the European Parliament to speak to you today. The cultural and creative sectors are among those most affected by the pandemic. They were the first ones that shut down and the last ones to open back up. I'm sorry to say that especially in the beginning, the European Union failed the sector. Freelancers and authors, for example, had hardly been able to benefit from the programs, from the aid programs, and as they had low operating costs, but also normal living costs, which were not covered by the previous credit programs. And although the creators and artists were in such a tense and uncertain situation, they still made staying home for the rest of us so much easier. They had shown us that the cultural and creative sector are systematically relevant. I'm happy that we can witness the overall amplified role that culture plays for the European Union today that it did 10 or 20 years ago. The pandemic was a powerful warning that we need to do better in protecting our CCIs. But COVID-19 had mainly exacerbated already existing problems. First and foremost, the cultural sector has suffered from inadequate provisions of public funding for a long time, which makes it difficult to set new priorities or to support the sector's resilience. This is why initiatives and projects like FLIP are so valuable. The preparatory action co-funded by the EU and project partners aim to build a stronger resilience of the cultural and creative sector by further strengthening the overall system. I like that it does not just focus on one aspect, but on the whole ecosystem. We often talk about the creative part of culture, the feel-good aspect that we all enjoy. However, we should not forget that the creative and culture industries are an economical force. The CCIs alone employ close to 10 million people in the EU, and many of them are young people. And they represent no less than around 4.4% of the EU's GDP in terms of total turnover, which is 2.3 times more than that of the automotive industry. Therefore, I appreciate the 4 aspects that Flip focused on: finance, learning, innovation, and intellectual property rights for the CCSI. An important question remains: how far does the earlier mentioned appreciation for culture go beyond rhetoric and symbolism? And does it find its expression in substantial policymaking? This is something the Committee on Culture and Education in the EP is fighting hard for. In 2022, the EU will launch an exciting new mobility scheme for cultural professionals and organizations worth 21 million euro. Evidently, this is only a drop in the ocean, but a welcome drop, we hope, for those creators and cultural professionals whom it will allow to go abroad for international collaborations, for professional development, to find new audiences, to present their work, or to co-create with others. And nothing keeps us from continuing being a driving force for innovation, including by means of pilot projects and preparatory actions like yours. I sincerely hope that we can learn from this pandemic, that everybody understands the extraordinary role of the cultural and creative sector, that people and especially state leaders start to see the enormous economic potential of the sector, and that from now on the sector will get the recognition and support it deserves. We still can do better to make our creative and cultural sector more resilient. Sure, there have been a number of encouraging developments in recent years, such as the European Year of Cultural Heritage in 2018, a strengthened Creative Europe program, and new European initiatives in the cultural sphere, such as the new European Bauhaus or a mobility scheme for art. But no, culture does not yet enjoy the central status it deserves in the European project. We together have to fight for a better status of cultural policies on the European level. Culture gives Europe the soul that it needs so much. That is why culture is of systematical relevance and not just nice to have. We as human beings are cultural beings. It is an essential part of our existence. And that is why we have to fight for a better positioning. Now I wish you a successful event and a fruitful exchange, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Verheyen, for these really kind words, and also for very insightful thoughts regarding the status and conditions of working conditions of the artists, and also in general their recognition as a really important factor in the future transformation of our societies. And these are definitely topics that we'll be discussing today later on during the conference. So I thank you very much for your intervention. It's really, well, one of the positive sides of the pandemic, we have to say, if there are any positive ones, is that we've all become really tech savvy and made really these great leaps in digital organization of events, so we could have you here with us virtually, if not physically, and we hope to welcome you also in physical presence next time at our event. Thank you. Now it's my pleasure to welcome Guillemette Madinière, who will be representing the French presidency of the Council of the European Union. She is the chair of the Cultural Affairs Committee, so she will give us the perspective from the member states and France, Republic of France, as now the chair of the Council. Thank you, Guillemette.
Bonjour à tous, Madame la députée, Mesdames et Messieurs, chers collègues et amis. Avant tout, merci de m'avoir conviée à représenter la présidence du Conseil de l'Union européenne à l'occasion de cette première conférence des parties prenantes du projet Creative Flip. Je tenais à adresser mes premiers mots et mes premières pensées, ainsi que, je crois, je peux m'exprimer au nom de l'ensemble de mes collègues européens, aux artistes ukrainiens qui sont pour certains en fuite ou qui font face au conflit sur place. Lors de leur réunion informelle à Angers la semaine dernière, les ministres de la Culture ont adopté à l'unanimité une déclaration exprimant toute leur solidarité avec l'Ukraine et son peuple. Ils ont en particulier marqué leur soutien aux artistes, aux journalistes et aux professionnels de la culture et des médias qui sont aujourd'hui menacés dans leur liberté. Et les ministres ont affirmé leur ambition de favoriser l'accueil de ces artistes dans des conditions en Europe qui leur permettent de poursuivre leurs activités et de préserver leur liberté d'expression et de création artistique.
Ladies and gentlemen, Madam Member of Parliament, friends and colleagues, first of all, I would like to give my first words and thoughts, like I guess we share all, to the Ukrainian artists. Just last week in Angers, we unanimously adopted a declaration expressing solidarity with Ukraine and its people. In particular, the ministers expressed their support for artists, journalists, cultural and media professionals whose freedom are now under threat. Our ministers affirmed their ambition to promote and welcome artists, journalists, cultural and media professionals in conditions that allow them to pursue their activities and preserve their freedom of expression and artistic creation. They also expressed their great concern and commitment to preserving Ukraine's rich cultural heritage in close cooperation with the relevant international organizations and partners.
Aujourd'hui, vous allez aborder des thématiques passionnantes qui sont au cœur des travaux du Conseil de l'Union européenne. En effet, l'une des priorités de notre programme de travail 2019-2022 est la consolidation d'un écosystème culturel et créatif soutenant les artistes, les professionnels de la culture et les contenus créatifs européens.
Today, you're going to address some exciting issues which are at the heart of the work of the Council of the European Union. Indeed, some of the priorities of our 2019-2022 work programme is a consolidation of a cultural and creative ecosystem supporting European artists, cultural professionals and creative content.
Comme l'a dit Madame Verheyen, cet écosystème a été mis à rude épreuve par la crise sanitaire. Vous vous souviendrez certainement des travaux menés durant la présidence portugaise, au cours de laquelle le Conseil avait adopté des conclusions sur la relance, la résilience et la durabilité des secteurs de la culture et de la création. Ces conclusions visaient à adopter une approche commune pour aider ces secteurs et faire face à l'urgence. D'importants moyens, y compris financiers, ont ainsi été mis en place au niveau national et européen pour soutenir la culture, dont on a vu à quel point elle était une valeur refuge pour les citoyens européens. D'autres mesures européennes ont été adoptées face aux conséquences de la pandémie. Des assouplissements temporaires en matière d'aide d'État, par exemple, ont permis de soutenir l'écosystème culturel européen. Les États membres se sont par ailleurs emparés des fonds de la facilité de relance et de résilience pour soutenir leur secteur culturel et créatif.
Just as my colleague, Madame Verheyen, just said, this ecosystem has been put to the test by the health crisis. We certainly remember the work carried out during the Portuguese presidency, under which the Council adopted conclusions on the recovery, resilience and sustainability of cultural and creative sectors. These conclusions aimed at adopting a common approach to help these sectors to deal with the emergency. Important means, including financials, were thus put in place at a national European level to support culture, which has been shown to be a refuge value to European citizens. Other European measures have been adopted in response to consequences of the pandemic. Temporary relaxation in aid state, for example, have helped to support the European cultural ecosystem. Member States have also taken advantage of the Recovery and Resilience Facility to support their cultural and creative sectors.
Sous présidence française, nous travaillons à des conclusions du Conseil visant à amorcer la conception d'une stratégie européenne à l'appui de l'écosystème des industries créatives et culturelles. L'objectif de ces conclusions est de dessiner des axes de moyen-long terme pour nos ICC, pour les accompagner face aux défis futurs et dépasser une logique de réponse à la crise. Ces conclusions visent à établir un Au cours de nos travaux, nous avons dégagé 5 axes autour desquels structurer une stratégie commune. Améliorer l'accès au financement pour les industries créatives et culturelles, stimuler la valorisation des compétences, de l'éducation et de la formation, préserver la richesse et la diversité culturelle européenne à l'ère numérique, notamment par des réflexions sur les actifs culturels stratégiques et sur la rémunération des auteurs, renforcer l'export des industries créatives et culturelles européennes et promouvoir la responsabilité sociale et la transition écologique de nos entreprises culturelles et créatives. Nous avons aussi travaillé sur la mobilité des artistes et des professionnels de la culture, qui est un sujet d'importance, comme l'a souligné Madame Ferraillon.
Under the French presidency, we are working on Council conclusions aimed at initiating the design of a European strategy to support the ecosystem of cultural and creative industries. The objective of these conclusions is to draw up a medium and long-term guidelines for our CCIs to support them in the face of future challenges and to go beyond a crisis response approach. In the course of our work, we have identified 5 areas which to structure this common strategy, which are improving access to financing for cultural and creative enterprises, stimulating the development of skills, education and training, preserving Europe's cultural wealth and diversity in the digital age, in particular through reflections on strategic cultural assets and on the remuneration of authors, strengthening the export of European cultural and creative industries, and promoting the social responsibility and ecological transition of our cultural and creative enterprises. And I'll also add the mobility of artists and professionals of the cultural sector, which is just as important. And our colleague, Madame Verheyen, just mentioned this as well earlier in her speech.
La question du statut et des conditions de travail dans l'écosystème créatif et culturel est bien sûr prégnante pour en assurer la résilience. Des travaux sont menés dans le cadre d'un groupe de la méthode ouverte de coordination qui réunit des experts des États membres, dont je sais que plusieurs d'entre eux participent à cette journée Creative Flip. Je suis sûre que les débats d'aujourd'hui nourriront utilement les travaux de ce groupe.
The issue of status and working conditions in the creative and cultural ecosystem is of course of great importance to ensure its resilience. Work is being carried out in the framework of an open method of coordination group, which brings together experts from the member states, several of whom I know are participating in this event today. I am sure that today's discussions will provide useful input to the work of this group.
Creative Flip est un projet unique en son genre, aussi car il remet au centre de l'attention les enjeux de la propriété intellectuelle. Le droit d'auteur est en effet une pierre angulaire du financement de la création européenne. La révision de la directive droit d'auteur en 2018 a précisément doté l'Union d'un acte législatif innovant et équilibré qui vise à garantir l'application et le renforcement en ligne du droit d'auteur et des droits des créateurs et des industries culturelles et créatives. La présidence française conduit actuellement des travaux en filière droit d'auteur du Conseil de l'UE afin d'identifier des solutions pour assurer l'effectivité et la pleine mise en œuvre de notre ambitieux modèle européen du droit d'auteur. En effet, nous avons assisté récemment à des tentatives de contournement des règles, par exemple sur le droit voisin des éditeurs de presse, et à des tentatives de certains acteurs internationaux d'imposer un autre modèle de rémunération que celui que nous avons choisi pour nos auteurs en Europe.
Creative Flip is also unique in that it brings intellectual property issues back into focus. Copyright is indeed a cornerstone of the financing of European creation. The revision of the Copyright Directive in 2018 has provided the European Union with an innovative and balanced piece of legislation that aims to ensure the enforcement and strengthening of copyright and the right of creators and cultural and creative industries online in the face of online services that have become very important contributors. The French presidency is currently conducting work in the EU Council copyright sector to identify solutions to ensure the effectiveness and full implementation of our ambitious European copyright model. And indeed, we have recently seen attempts to circumvent the rules, for example, on the neighboring rights of press publishers, and attempts by some international players to impose a different remuneration model than the one that we have chosen for our authors in Europe.
Les discussions d'aujourd'hui sont donc particulièrement d'actualité, y compris dans la perspective de l'ouverture prochaine de nos discussions sur le futur programme de travail pour la culture post-2022. Et je vous écouterai donc avec beaucoup d'intérêt. Je vous remercie pour votre attention et je vous souhaite une très bonne journée de travail.
Today's discussions are therefore particularly relevant, especially in the view of the upcoming opening of our discussions on the future work programme for culture. I will therefore listen with great interest to your presentations, and I thank you very much for your attention and wish you a very nice working day.
Thank you very much, Ms. Medinier, on the words on behalf of the French presidency, and we're really glad to hear once again about the priorities which we all, I think, share. And we sincerely hope that the discussion today could, at least in any part, contribute maybe to the future plans and priorities in the future work plan for culture. And I would also like to thank Viviane Arnaud, who supported us in enabling us to really support and fully embrace the multiculturalism and multilingualism of the European Union, and promoted by the French presidency as well. So thank you very much. It is now my pleasure to welcome Mr. Tamas Schusz, who is the Director for Culture, Creativity and Sport at the European Commission, Director General for Education and Culture. The DG EAC has been our main coordinator of the Creative Flip project, and we really appreciate all the support and cooperation throughout these years since 2019. So it's my pleasure to give the word to Mr. Schusz.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? I think this microphone is a bit
Yes, they're coming.
not very well placed, but thank you. I think it's better now. You will agree with me. Okay. Well, Madam Chair, Madam Presidency, dear friends and colleagues, thank you very much for this invitation. I must confess I'm very happy to be here today, and in fact I have very fond memories. I have a bit of a nostalgic feeling, and I may not be the only one in this room. It's more than 2 years ago that there was a similar Flip conference organized in this very room, which was the last one before COVID for many of us. So it really fills me with pleasure to see all of you again in person, and it's a completely new feeling to talk to you during the coffee break and just to see each other basically in real life. With all due respect, of course, to the amazing opportunities which were opened up by the digital world and from which we profited. No one denies that this was extremely useful and will remain very useful, but still it's difficult, or let's say impossible, to completely replace basically the personal encounters, especially in a field like ours, culture. Of course, the lockdowns and COVID has been a major challenge for the whole sector. But as you recall, and as also the previous speakers recalled, basically additional resources were provided at EU level, not immediately, but I would say within a reasonable delay. And all the sectors were able to profit from this, including the cultural and creative sectors. So we survived, and hope that it was not just a survival, but actually also new opportunities opened up. And I think we all feel strengthened today to continue on this road. Today, cultural and creative sectors are on the agenda more than ever. The new Creative Europe program, the Erasmus Plus program, the reinforced Horizon Europe with a specific cluster basically dedicated to culture and creativity, the upcoming KIC, And also the Digital Europe program and the Invest EU. I mean, there are many new initiatives which basically will serve us. Not to mention, of course, in addition, the new European Bauhaus project, which you all know, and many of you, I think, also participate in it. In a broader sense, I should also mention the European Pact for Skills, intending to build large-scale multi-stakeholder partnerships also for the sector. And the FLIP project's work is an important contribution also to this process. Now, focusing more on our agenda today, I think we can all be proud to set up the Creatives Unite platform together. By now, it has become a milestone, our common space to share initiatives and actions responding to COVID and also beyond. It's a highly successful operation with more than 50,000 users by now, and more than 1,300 published posts, as far as I know, is the latest result, which is very encouraging and a good sign for the future. So let me congratulate again the European Creative Hubs Network for their outstanding efforts to make all this happen. Of course, the same congratulation is due to the Goethe Institute. I mean, one of our major partners, not just in this regard, but on many other fronts. Not the last one, which also Madame Verheyen recalled, the mobility scheme, the iPortunus, which indeed was a resounding success. And let me just share with you the good news, which Madame Verheyen also mentioned, that we are really working hard to launch a full new program with 21 million euros for the next 3 years. I hope that many of you will be also able to profit from this. I'm very glad that the platform will be continued and new functionalities will be added to it in the next phase of FLIP. Additional features will be a specific funding tool for cultural and creative professionals and also an IPR tool. Both are really value-added, which you have been asking for. The planned specific FLIP funding tool will complement and build upon our own, the Commission's own recently established Culture EU or Kultur EU tool, which showcases funding opportunities for the sector in all EU programs, not just the cultural programs, until 2027. Now, this new specific tool will go beyond this. It will add funding sources at regional, local, and national level. And it will also include private sector funding and other new functionalities. And it will all be linked to the Culture EU guide. I understand that there will be much more explanation on all these new features and some sort of a brainstorming to fine-tune the tools and the whole new ways of working. Today you will be discussing about the resilience of the CCS and how to take things forward. You will also discuss the working conditions of artists and creative professionals. There was also a reference to this from the presidency. In line with the current work plan for culture, the Commission, as you know, already delivered a study on this. And this was followed by a Voices of Culture dialogue. And we have an OMC group up and running. And let me also welcome the members of this group. I bumped into some of them already during the coffee break, which again, some of these people I haven't seen for 2 years, so it was a very good feeling to see them again now. So, warm welcome to everyone. And at the same time, I would also like to thank the Creative Flip project for organizing this event and for gathering all of us here. I wish you basically a lot of inspiration, co-creation, and networking. Perhaps the last one is what we need most, because it's much easier to reflect on your own, but sometimes much more useful to network a bit and getting new ideas from each other. So thank you very much, and I wish you a nice and fruitful day.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schusch. It's really a pleasure to cooperate with your team on the future development of the Creatives Unite platform. And as you already announced, we will be discussing it later today, actually right after the welcome speeches, about the new features that will come up, and then later today to hear your inputs on its further development. And now it's really my pleasure well, it's strange to say I welcome you to your own space, but it's Mr. Pierre Pivet, who is the hub manager of La Vallée Creative Hub. Thank you very much for really welcoming us here to this space. It's really a pleasure. As Mr. Schusch said, we all really warmly remember the conference 2 years ago, so it's really a pleasure for all of us to be here again. And we'd really like to, for you to welcome us here to this space, but also tell us a little bit about the last 2 years and maybe future prospects.
Yeah, thank you. Of course, it's really strange for me to explain my project in front of you. I was used to explain my project in front of a computer, and I'm a bit anxious and emotional. Sorry about that. Most of you know La Vallée, and I will explain in 2 minutes what we are doing. La Vallée is a project developed by Smart. Smart is a corp who provides services to entrepreneurs. In La Vallée, we produce events. You can have an example in the other room, an exhibition from Elzo Durt. Elzo is a graphic designer, a famous graphic designer in Brussels. You can really visit the exhibition. There are some special things. It's really interesting. But we produce also performances, talks, like today, concert, parties, apéro, and so on. We provide also workplaces. We have more than 200 people working here in the building every day with a lot of activities. Most of them are working in the creation industry. We try to create link between them with animation, some animation. And we consider the project like a facilitator. Of course, I'm going to talk about the pandemic period, which was a strange period for us, something special with some negative things. I remember the frustration. That was really, for me, the best, the main important feeling I had during this period. My team was temporarily unemployed. That was, for me, something really difficult. We didn't have any public event. Strange for a building. We normally welcome more than 50,000 people a year. We had a lot of difficulties getting public helps. That was for us also a big challenge, and we have to think about a new business model. But also it's also a good thing. Also about some residents. Some had to leave the place. Especially the people who start the activities, and people who didn't have any social security. It represents more or less 15% of the resident who has to leave the place, because they had to choose between pay the apartment or pay the workplace. But we also had some positive action. We have to find some solutions, and it's always interesting to think about the project with the team, to talk. I explained that we have to find new business model. We had new occupation of the spaces. A lot of filming during this period. We also create a new space. You visited it at the entrance. The welcome room, the bar, was before like a techno club. Now it's a bar. Yeah, and we also try to produce new local economy activities. It was a new challenge for us. And new activities. We work more with local producer. We developed also a local market and try to find new solutions for those activities. Also, we apply for Erasmus Plus project, a new challenge for us. And now we are leader for one project called Places Treaty. We work on the business model of Places Treaty Creative Hub, and also on a new way of training in places like La Vallée. The second project we are as partner is called Opinus. We are creating a toolbox for the access to the digital tools, and also a virtual creative hub. About the residents, there are also good stories. We never closed the space. Even during the first lockdown, the workplaces were open because some artisans and artists needed the tools to work. For example, a ceramist, there is the oven here, and it was impossible for her to work in her apartment. And that means that some people here had still a social life, and that create new link. Not like I don't like to say like a family, but like a community. A new project happens. Also for the residents, they have to find new opportunity, and they develop new project and also new way of selling. Internet was the solution, and that create new opportunity. As the restaurant and the bar were closed, a lot of people they didn't spend money for food and drinks, but they spend a lot of money for their apartment. And that means most of the artists and the artisans, they increase their activities. And it was really a good thing. Finally, during the 2 lockdown, we reopened for 2 or 3 months, and that was really a strange feeling, something special, a special energy. I remember about that. I have an event, especially with the Goethe Institute. We produce an installation, big sound installation in both venue, in both rooms, called a modular organer system, and we had 500 people visiting the installation. It was special. Finally, I want to thank you, all of us, all the Creative Fleet partners for the organization and being here, and La Régie TV for the live session, the live streaming. They are resident here. They really do a good job. And also my team, Marie, Pedro, Hicham, Boris, Caroline, thank you. Without you, nothing is possible. Thank you, and enjoy your day. Bye.
Thank you, Pierre, really so much to you and the whole team, as you mentioned, from La Vallée Creative Hub and also from La Régie and Citizen Motion, who are following us here today. We're really happy that we were able to engage more members of this community in supporting the actual implementation of this event, and also enabling for the audience online to also have the live stream and see us. It's a shame that they cannot be here today also to enjoy the wonderful art that Pierre mentioned, which is on the walls here in the gallery. And just for the ones who are here, in the booklet, in the program that you have at the very end, you have a small text about La Vallée Creative Hub, about the history of its development, but also about Elzo Tut, who is the artist, in case you're interested in learning more about it. So once again, really thanks to La Vallée for welcoming us here. And now we have the final intervention in the welcome addresses. It's Mr. Johannes Ebert, who is the Secretary General of the Goethe Institute. Goethe Institute is the lead partner of the Creative Flip project. Unfortunately, he cannot be with us here today, but we will be able to see him, as we said, with the magical digital solutions from online. Thank you.
I remember very well the last time I took part in the Creative Flip conference. It was before the Corona crisis, and we all personally met in Brussels. There were many stakeholders of the creative industries, CCI experts, and driving forces for the whole sector of creative industries in Europe. It was a very good conference with many exchanges, the exchange of experiences, of giving advice and of learning together. Dear members of the European Parliament, of the European Commission, dear colleagues, dear friends. On behalf of the Creative Flip Consortium, the Goethe Institute and our project partners European Creative Hubs Network, IDEA Consult, 3S Unternehmensberatung and Intellectual Property Institute Luxembourg, I would like to welcome you to the Flipping Perspectives Maximizing Exchange Stakeholder Conference. This is the first conference in the new phase of our project, now as an EU co-funded preparatory action. Creative Flip was initiated in 2019 by the European Parliament and is implemented in cooperation with the European Commission, Directorate General for Education and Culture, both of whom I would like to thank for continuous and successful cooperation throughout the years. This cooperation brought about many successful initiatives, such as the Creatives Unite platform. It is therefore my great pleasure to open this event jointly with the representatives of these two institutions, as well as with the French presidency of the Council of the EU, whom I would like to thank for devotion and focus on culture during their term. Finally, I would like to thank our host, the La Vallée Creative Hub in Molenbeek, and to express my sincerest regret that I cannot join you today in person in Brussels at this beautiful venue where, jointly with the European Commission, we organized the truly memorable Flipping the Odds conference about 2 years ago. Shortly after this conference took place, we were forced to forego any notion of physical events by the new reality and restrictions brought on by the pandemic. We have faced unprecedented strain on our societies, well-being and economies, and none more so than the cultural and creative sectors and its members. We are all well familiar with the devastating effect that the health crisis had on our sector and the tremendous loss of revenue and livelihoods, particularly for the SMEs, individuals and freelancers that compose the majority of its share. The crisis has in fact only unearthed and put into starker light the already existing problems in this ecosystem, such as the precarious working conditions, the status of artists and cultural professionals, as well as fair pay. And I'm extremely happy these will be among the main topics discussed at the conference today. At the same time, the pandemic has made it clear how invaluable culture is for the resilience and well-being of our societies. Even more, the rapid changes in the digital and the innovation sphere spurred on by the crisis have shown us that culture and creativity have an extremely important role to play in the future transformation of our societies and must imperatively be an integral part of this process. And this precisely is an important message in the work of Creative Flip and a topic of today's conference that will be presented by our experts later in the day. The current terrible events in Ukraine have shown us once again how fragile our current situation is and how unpredictable the future of our society and the challenges it may face. We stand together with the entire European cultural and creative sector, which has strongly condemned all acts of violence against the people of Ukraine. We have always emphasized the importance and power of international cultural relations and cooperation as they incite exchange, people-to-people contexts, learning from each other, to name only a few elements. This is why we support the mobility of artists and cultural professionals and foster opportunities for exchange among the different sector stakeholders from different parts of Europe, such as the conference we are organizing today. Therefore, it gives me great pleasure that we are finally returning to meeting each other in person, exchanging and working on the most important issues for the CCI sector, its future, and that of our societies. And I find it truly symbolic that this first time, at least in the context of our project, we are once again meeting at La Vallée Creative Space in Brussels, which I have mentioned in the beginning. In a way, we have come a full circle. At the same time, both us and our societies are in a very different place from where we were 2 years ago. We cannot satisfy ourselves with simply having the CCI sector bounce back, but we must maximize our exchange and flip the perspectives to ensure that it bounces forward. I wish you a successful conference and thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks to Mr. Ebert and all the partners of the Creative Flip project. But what is Creative Flip? So I think we will finally answer this question to those of you who are maybe not as familiar with what we do in Creative Flip as maybe some of the others. And it's my pleasure to share the stage with my dear colleague, Vasilis Haralampidis, who is the president of the European Creative Hubs Network. So between the two of us, we will try to explain a little bit what the Creative Flip project is all about, and maybe a little bit of the history, what we've been doing so far, and what we plan to do in the coming period. So we prepared a small presentation for you, and I'm just wondering if we can have it on the screen. So I think I can already start where the presentation comes. The Creative Flip project has 5 partners, the Goethe Institute, European Creative Hubs Network, but also our partners IDEA Consult, 3S Unternehmensberatung, and Intellectual Property Institute from Luxembourg. And we've been implementing the project since 2019. It first started off as a pilot project to European Parliament, and we've closed this first phase this summer, and now we've continued our work as the preparatory action. I think now I would really like to have the presentation, if we can. Click. Ah, so it was all my fault. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so as we said, you already have it here on the screen. We've moved on from the first phase now to the next. And of course, the objective remains more or less the same, to really support a strong and resilient cultural creative ecosystem. And we specifically focus on 4 areas of finance, learning, skills, innovation, and intellectual property rights. So I think you've also received at the entrance one of our small booklets. This is an impact story from the first phase of our project, which really gives kind of a summary of the main outputs and outcomes of the last 2.5 years. In this first project, we've also dealt with the 4 topics. Instead of the intellectual property rights, we only had specific focus on patenting. But we've also done lots of different activities. So you've already heard a little bit about the Creatives Unite platform, and you'll hear more from my colleague Vasilis. But we've also implemented interesting real-life things, such as peer-to-peer exchanges between creative hubs, such as cooperation projects between creative hubs and educational institutions, which all had really wonderful results. And I think also at the entrance you were able to receive the 2 brochures or tools, which were the outcomes of these activities. And for the audience watching us online, we invite you to visit the Creative Flip website, where you have all the publications. Another example of an output that we produced in the first part of the project was the So You Need Money guide, which was kind of a hard copy first part of our work on this topic of how to improve the financial literacy of the sector, but also how to get the sector maybe to broaden their views in terms of what are the funding and financing opportunities out there and how to actually mix them better, as Pierre also mentioned, to change their business plan to adapt to the current situation. And this guide is in a way a basis for the tool we are developing and that we will present later today. So we had also 4 big international conferences. This is the one that was mentioned here at La Vallée. There are also conference conclusions that came out, which are also available on our website and still very much valid today. We had really intense discussions in small groups, and that's what we hope to replicate today. So we really look forward to the parallel sessions this afternoon, where we'll be able to discuss in small World Café tables on different topics. And this is one of our favorite photos. We had to make people go out to the art to take it together. Today, we'll only make you go into the atrium later on, so this is just a fair warning. But it's really a wonderful memory from the event, you know, smiling faces and everyone being present there. And of course, then Corona hit after that conference, and we were not able to meet each other in person anymore. And in response to the situation and the crisis, the Creative Flip, in cooperation with the European Commission, came up with the Creatives Unite platform. The goal of the platform was to gather in one place all initiatives related to the pandemic for and by the cultural creative sector. And we had a large online conference at the time to mark its launch and to show some already first really good examples of the initiatives where people were able to quickly adapt and have some really inspiring examples of how to cope with the crisis. And as I said, so in June last year, we had the final closing conference of the first part of our project, which was held also online, given the circumstances at the time. And we were able then to present all our main findings. So this is again the same publication, and it's really hard to name all the different outputs we've had. But for instance, some of those which are maybe not less familiar is that we have a huge, thanks to our partners from IPIL, report about everything you need to know about patenting in the cultural creative sector, the examples, the analysis of all the data for the past years in terms of the good examples and so on. We're also working on skills, for instance, on ESCO as one of the tools provided by the European Commission to see how it can be better used by the cultural creative sector, especially in terms of labor market demand and so on. So now we're at the new phase of Creative Flip, and this is what we're doing today. As we've said, we still have the 4 main pillars, and in a way they all work towards, in one way, the Creatives Unite platform, which is now growing in terms of different tools that will be implemented and the scope of the platform, but also, as we said, the topics of the resilience of the CCS ecosystem. So we will be working on improving this ecosystem through different things. So one way is, for instance, improving access to finance, helping the CCI find the right opportunities for them in terms of different financing mix and improving their financial literacy, also improving their knowledge and capacity building in terms of intellectual property rights, because this was one of the findings from our first project, that unfortunately there is just simply not enough knowledge in the sector still about the available IP tools. Then, as we said, we're working further on ESCO, and for instance, in your packs here, you have a small flyer regarding a survey we are currently conducting in terms of how the sector is potentially using ESCO as a tool and how it can be further improved to support in writing job openings or CVs, or in general later on with a wider application also for EU forecasting tools. Today we'll be also discussing the status and working conditions of CCS professionals, but also mobility, peer learning. This is something that is also part of the project, which will be then announced at a later stage, again with creative hubs and more long-term cooperation. And finally, of course, the recognition of the role and importance of the culture creative sector for cross-sectoral cooperation, how we can ensure that the voices are heard and the CCS actors are really integral part of future positive transformations of our societies. But my colleagues who are experts in this topic will discuss this later and give you much more detail into all of these topics that Creative Flip is doing throughout. So now I give the word to my colleague Vasilis. He will talk about Creatives Unite.
I have my own microphone, so thank you. Very nice to be here today again with so many people. Yes, so we've talked a lot about Creatives Unite, so I won't go through the past and what we've been doing up to now, but I want to take you through a bit about the future. So, as you already know, Creatives Unite quickly became a one-stop destination for all the initiatives relating to our sectors. And that was really overwhelming and successful, particularly the first days of the pandemic, but also today, I mean, that we've broadened the scope of the content, and we're really happy about it. And we see that our culture and creative sectors are so active. And so within the framework of this new program, this extension of our program, we want to start working, and we are currently actually developing the second phase of the platform. And the idea behind the second phase of the platform is that we will be able to extend its capacities to host content. We're also, of course, doing some fancy stuff like revamping the looks and feel. Here you can have a sneak peek of how it will look like. But the most important bits are that we're adding up a lot of more editorial content, which is really important for us. And also we are kind of realized that we will always have urgencies and that our sectors are responsive. We are responding in everything that's happening around us, like today in this devastating situation with the war, and we want to document all the responses. So right now we started working, gathering all the initiatives for the Ukraine war and everything that's been done. There are so many things happening across Europe, and we're really happy about it. And it's available in the old format of the platform today, but also soon and gradually we will start deploying also the new infrastructure. The new infrastructure will be able also to host other tools that are being created from other organizations, but we are also will be hosting two main tools that we are currently developing and are deriving from our past experience the last years. So we are currently developing a tailored platform that will work also complementary with the Create.eu platform that gives you access to EU funding programs, but this will complement and give you all the extra information that you might need for local, regional actions and specific programs that are currently active, and will have also a tailored functionality. So we're really working hardly to develop something that would give you personalized information about your funding needs, about the funding profile that you need to build, the knowledge that you need to have access to different funding schemes, but also the specific programs and providers, which are really important. And we're really happy. Here you can have a sneak peek of how it will look like. But throughout the day, there is a booth. If any one of you wants to test it, it's a beta version, and we would love to have the feedback, your feedback about this platform. We're really happy about this development. The colleagues from IDEA Consult have been doing amazingly research job, and we're really proud about what they've been delivering. And we will deploy this later in the year. We are also developing a one-stop application for all available resources for intellectual property. And this is something that came up, as already Dubravka said, from our previous work, and I think it's going to be really useful for creative people. And the microphone is not, okay, no, it was the microphone itself, yeah. Sorry for the bad sound. Yes, and this is going to be the IP rights application. It's still under development, so this is a beta version. You don't see the final design, but we're again proud because we are collecting so many initiatives and so many tools that will facilitate all kind of cultural and creative professional needs to secure their work. But the most important bit for the new Creatives Unite platform is that we foresee that this will become a one-stop destination for everything around our sectors, and we feel that this is something that is missing. So we are developing an infrastructure that will be able even to accumulate more initiatives and more tools from our ecosystem. And that's really, really important. For example, right now we are working with a sister project, which is the Makers Exchange program, and we will also planning to integrate a mobility mapping tool that you would have the ability to track all current mobility actions. And also, all those things, I mean, you will be able to build a personal profile and you will be able to get notified every time that something of interest comes up, which we feel that's really important. You will be notified of anything of interest, of any deadline coming up, which is really, really important. But we plan also to use the infrastructure that we are creating behind, I mean, not for the end user, but for the scientific communities. So we're going to use the data collected from the everyday use to facilitate research. So all those profiles that will be integrated within this platform will be used for this kind of extensive need of survey analysis and identifying our sectors and our future needs. So that's briefly about what's coming up next for the Creatives Unite platform. And back to Dubravka, maybe, yes, to sum it up.
Is my microphone? Yes. Thank you very much. So if you have any questions, of course, we are free during the breaks throughout the day. But I'm sure you will learn more from the colleagues and the speeches coming up and also from the parallel sessions. So right now we go to the next stage, which is Impulse intro. And I invite our colleague, Jos Hensius, to come to the stage. So he's going to be our moderator for the next session and introduce the speakers.
Thanks, Dubravka. Okay, Lisa, yeah, just sit down already. For the next part, for the Impulse part, we're looking at two sides of strengthening of the coin of strengthening the ecosystem of the CCS. We have been talking a lot about resilience, also in terms of bouncing back, but we all know that bouncing back to normal will not be completely the case. Yeah, and then just sitting next to you, which is better, and very comfortable. But also that we need to bounce forward. And bounce forward means that we not can do the same as we ever did, but also in the sense of going through a transformation of the CCS ecosystem, especially want to play a role in the future of society. Now, the first presentation will be, unfortunately, online. It was supposed to be physically here, but unfortunately, COVID is still there. Let's call it an enabler. It's about fair practice in the working conditions of the CCS. And the second one is about the role in societal transformation. Now, the first speaker will be Brigitte Winkler-Kommer, and she's from the Austrian Federal Ministry of Art and Culture. And she's there as head of the Department for Music and Performing Arts. And she will tell about the process of the fair practice in Austria. I also welcome Lisa Lang. She's from the Climate Kick from EIT. And she's the Director of EU Affairs and a policy orchestrator. And I think we might know what that means, a policy orchestrator, after her presentation. I mean, I've never seen that title before anywhere. And she will educate us on the possibilities for the CCS to play a role in the future within this quite complex world of the KICs. But first, let's just hear Brigitte Winkler-Kommer on fair practice in Austria. And I think she is online and live there. Ah, thank you. There she is. Yes. Yeah, you are there.
Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, we can hear you. And I'm very happy to have you at least here online. Please start your presentation. You're very welcome.
Yeah, please, can I ask the technicians to be so kind and share my PowerPoint presentation? First of all, I would like to say a warm welcome from Vienna. I'm very sorry that I can't be there physically. I intended to come to Brussels, but yeah, COVID and the difficult context made it impossible. So can you probably already see my presentation? Could you give me some feedback if you could? Yeah, here it is. Wonderful. Okay, so I'm with you to give you a short overview over the Austrian fairness process that started in autumn 2020. Well, there are two main goals for this fairness process in Austria in the field of arts and culture. The first goal is to create more fairness in the sector of independent arts and culture. And of course, the second very important goal is to implement fair pay. Could you please proceed to the next slide? When you look at our government program from 2020 to 24, you can find a paragraph stating that the federal and the regional level are invited to negotiate a fair pay strategy. This is why we started the process at the end of 2020 and formed two major working groups. The first group was the working group Fairness, consisting of representatives by the regional and federal level, all from the area of art funding. And the second very important group was the Forum Fairness, including all main stakeholders of arts and culture in the field of independent arts and culture. Yeah, please proceed to the next next slide. What is important to know quite generally is in Austria, the main and primary competence for art funding lies with the regions. So the federal level is never able to negotiate something without the regions, which is a good thing. We are codependent on each other and we need to talk to each other, which is basically very, very good once you want to change something. When we started talking about fairness and fair pay, we asked the stakeholders to give us a lot of input. We asked them to give us an idea what they want to talk about, and they gave us really lots of information, which was really interesting. And we simply saw after a very short while at the end of 2020 that we need to broaden the field. We can't start by discussing fair pay exclusively. We need to respect the fact that fair pay is only possible if you discuss collateral topics that are really linked to the topic of fair pay. And we also understood that we need to take or undertake preparatory actions to be able to talk about fair pay. So one basic thing was we needed to tackle the legal question, and you all know this really present problem. The minimum fees that are being introduced by the stakeholders, they are not negotiated with someone, because the stakeholders, they basically stand for the employee part only, but there is no employer side. So they introduce minimum fees, but they are not negotiated. There is no collective bargaining in the free sector and the independent sector, as you know. So this is why we needed to have a lawyer, and we contracted an expert opinion to find out how can we deal with this minimum fees. Well, we got a very interesting paper back and also some solutions. So clear at this very moment, it's clear that the minimum fees cannot be mandatory within our funding programs, but we can give a hint to these minimum fees, and we can also the minimum fees are also, since the autumn of last year, by the way, they are one of many criteria you have to meet when you apply for funding at the ministry. But it's not a mandatory criterion, because legally it can't be at this very stage. But due to the measures taken or initiatives taken by the European Union, there might be less tension with EU competition law once the European Union finds a different approach to this difficult topic. Well, one of the ideas coming from the stakeholders was also, they invited us to say, let's talk about a fairness code or fair practice code. You might know the Dutch best practice It's called the Fair Practice Code. It has been negotiated a couple of years ago in the Netherlands, and it was initiated by the stakeholders. In Austria, we followed a different approach because the stakeholders asked us to do that. For the last year now, we negotiated a fairness codex, which is about to be finished soon. And we invited the regional level, the federal level, and stakeholders, and also best practices. So only a couple of weeks ago, we had one of the final rounds, and we had best practices present, meaning we invited all the regions to come up with the idea which institution could be good for applying a fairness codex. And also, of course, we always had the stakeholders in the independent sector present in our negotiations. And we are currently about to finish this paper, and it will soon be presented. And the idea is that, for example, also very big institutions like the Austrian or the Vienna State Opera will apply this text and put it on its website. So this is also one of the measures we took within this broad framework of fairness in arts and culture. In September of last year, I mean, maybe one of you were even present or followed our symposium online. We had a very big international symposium in Vienna dealing with the topic of fairness, and we introduced many European best practices and examples. The keynote speaker was Catherine Magnan, who gave us a really excellent overview of the measures being taken by the EU currently. And there's also an OMC group dealing with, you know, the topic of more fairness and the difficult question how to make payments fairer in the independent sector. And Austria is also part of this OMC group, which is a very important group for us. Well, one of the main preparatory actions for our fair pay focus group, and also within the fairness process, was the fair pay gap study. We contracted this last spring, in spring 2021, and we developed a questionnaire with the stakeholders and with the regional and federal level, which was quite a difficult task because, you know, once you want to really know about payment and wages and fees in the independent sector, you need a lot of transparency, which is a challenge. But we, I think we came up with quite a good questionnaire, and we undertook the study, and the results have been presented in January 2021, so only a couple of weeks ago. And the main finding is that the gap on average, the fair pay gap on average in Austria is 21% of personnel expenses. But what does that mean? That does not mean that, for example, the federal level needs to cover exclusively these 21%. It means that within these 21%, you have one part that belongs to the regions, one part that belongs to the federal level, and also maybe one part that belongs to the applicants as well. But what it also showed, and what you will see later on when I discuss our pilot phase of fair pay, fair pay is only possible if you look closely and really tailor-made to each and every applicant. You can't really say, okay, it's an average, it's 21%, so let's just use this percentage. This is completely impossible. We have to really find a very precise and detailed approach. Well, once the study was presented in January of this year, but the study is, by the way, online from the very first day, so full transparency here from our side. Once we had the study, we formed the focus group fair pay, which is, of course, the core of our fairness process. So we tried within our fairness process to really approach the topic of fair pay from very different sides. A very important topic is also, in order to have fair pay, you need to have the right contract behind every contract. You have to have the fair contracts and so on. And we found out that also big institutions in Austria may not always give out the right contracts to independent artists to come and cooperate within a project with a big institution. So there is still a lot to do. And we really saw that we have so many areas where we need to be fairer to make fair pay possible. Okay, please, next slide. So what we are doing since the end of January now in the ministry is we started a pilot phase of fair pay. And our state secretary, Andrea Meyer, could also negotiate 6.5 million euros more this year for only paying fair pay dedicated funding money. Yeah. Of course, we do hope that we will have this money on a long-term level, so also the next year and the year after that. And we do hope that, and I think the indication is that it might work out. But for this very year, we have 6.5 million more. To give you an idea how much that is art funding on the federal level in Austria is all in total maybe 500 million euros. And from these 500 million, you could say that approximately 55 million euros are given to the independent sector and to organizations who are not linked to collective agreements and who are not owned by the state or a region. So 55 million euros is our normal budget to give out to the independent sector in Austria. Now we have 6.5 million more. And what we do with this 6.5 million, I will tell you now, because this is what we created after looking at the study and talking to the stakeholders. So of course, as funding institutions, we give out contracts. And in these contracts, we have now very precise clauses dealing with fair pay. So what are we doing explicitly? In the funding agreements, we state that the grants are explicitly dedicated to fair pay measures. And the funds made available are intended to contribute to fairer payment within the organization. So at the first stage, now we are in the pilot phase, and we created some sort of calculation sheet. Every organization has to fill in, but this sheet now in the first step of this pilot fair pay strategy is not super precise, because we are currently also in the period where we negotiate our pilot phase with the stakeholders. We really need their feedback, but to really come up with a simple solution, we started the pilot phase with an easy sheet they need to fill out, and it does not, for example, state every person in an organization by name and with the concrete wage or fees or whatever. So we have at the moment an easy approach, but during the next couple of weeks and months, we will negotiate a more precise fair pay strategy, because we need to get experience, and we need also to get the feedback from the stakeholders. And only next week we are going to have a big workshop with the stakeholders to give us first feedback. What did we do okay, what was not ideal, and so on. So we're currently really developing a fair pay strategy, because it's quite complex once you look at it on a detailed level. So, but one of our criteria is also that we ask the funded institution that those fees and or salaries that have a high fair pay gap are primarily taken into account. So what we do is we ask the institution to closely look at their own structure and ask them to create more fairness. With the additional money we give, they are asked to create more fairness. And the fair pay subsidy may only be used for existing jobs, not for the creation of new jobs. This is also something we are currently doing during this pilot phase. We know that this is probably not ideal, but it is a first step, because what we want to do is at the moment is we want to use this 6.5 million to create more fairness in existing structures. The next step will, of course, be to be more open and to also create more jobs or contracts within an organization. Okay, please proceed to the next slide. And then, of course, some funding areas of our big funding scheme are not included in the pilot phase because it simply doesn't make sense. For example, grants, wherever we give out fixed amounts. For example, an artist can apply for a 6 months grant simply to invest in their own creativity and work on their inspiration, and not in a concrete project. This is where we give out grants with a fixed sum. And this funding scheme is not included in the fair pay pilot phase. Also, organizations owned by the public sector, by the federal level, maybe the state or a big museum or museums or theaters in the regions in Austria, they are not included. in the fair pay pilot phase because they are simply owned by the state, and we clearly assume that fair payment is in place. And not included are also organizations applying collective agreements. So where a collective agreement is in place, of course, it should not be talking about fair pay, because fair pay should be part of the collective agreement. Yeah, that's it so far from my side. Thank you for your attention, and now I'm awaiting your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brigitte. This is a very interesting contribution on this process. I think it's a very interesting discussion also for the future about should the government be paying for fair pay, or should the cultural institutions do that themselves? Should that be fair? But that's, I think, one of the discussions that's playing around in different countries. But thank you much for your contribution. And we hope to see you face to face again in the near future. I will now go to Lisa Lang. You're going to do your presentation, and I think there's a clicker for you. And well, I'm very curious to what you're going to tell us.
Thank you very much. Hello, good morning. It's still morning, right? You know? Okay, good. Okie dokie, let's see if that works. Where do I have to point? Ah, trying every direction.
It's not there yet.
Maybe it's a, is it a PlayStation? Okay, great. Hi. So my name is Lisa Lang. I have a really, like, my title, orchestrator. I'm working on a lot of music memes on that, but it's kind of like it represents our mindset. Are we in a time continuum now? Okay, I have a lot of memes about Captain Janeway in Star Trek also, but that's a different story. Female leadership. Good. So just, you know, to address your question about like what orchestrator mean, is like, it's actually, you know, walking the talk is like policy is all about like being a composer of different music instruments and bring them together in harmony, although this harmony coordinated also can be wonderful music. But that's actually how we at EIT Climate Kick see policy. It's like we have to bring different voices and rhythms together to fight one common cause, and that's climate change. So, who are we? Also for you, like you creative people, if like you haven't heard anything about the European Institute for Technology, that is okay and normal, because the EIT kind of has been built without culture creative industries in mind, because that was before 2019, before the Commission said, hey, you exist, right? So yeah, moving forward. So the Climate Kick is one of the oldest kicks, most senior kicks. Kicks means, by the way, knowledge innovation community, right? Also, name is the game. We are focusing a lot on education. It's all about innovation, but innovation is not only about technology, right? We need also culture creative industries. We are learning new vocabularies, yes. But also, we as Climate Kick, we are actually like the biggest agency on EU level to fight climate change. So we have the mandate from the Commission, so we are the activation agency, right? So like we are very much plugged into the bureaucracy of policymaking, EU bubble, Brussels bubble, but we are actually there to implement and activate. So you can kind of see us as your green transition WordPress plugin, probably. That's the best way how to describe it. So, oh yeah, I have to do a little bit of name dropping with like numbers and figures and something like that. So in the last almost 12 years, we distributed over 4 billion euro in investing in startups, in events to support the green transition as we tell it. We have invested in a lot of startups. We run a whole series of education programs. Basically, feel free to go to the website, join on the newsletter, on our social media, because there's something coming up very quickly, and then something has changed. In January 2021, the new European Bauhaus program joined us. We have something what is called cross kicks, because we are not the only kick in EIT. We are 8 in total. So we have food and mobility and energy and digital and raw materials. And, we actually have a culture creative kick coming up. And a shout out to all of the consortiums which are applying, because the deadline is on the 23rd next week. So I hope you get a little bit of sleep, because it's quite massive. So the importance of that is that this culture creative kick on EIT level will be the European innovation agency for culture and creative industries. It sounds big because it is. But it's also, again, suppose, see that in the context is like, that is a culture creative kick within a system which hasn't been built for culture creative industries. It's not, it's understand the monster, fight the monster. It's not that it was against it. It was just like, because, it wasn't acknowledged yet. So we are in a transition phase in here. So in order to kind of like lay down the land and, teach internally also like how to deal with these people, we started a cross kick where cross kicks are where we all work together, all of the other kicks together on big projects. And one of them is the new European Bauhaus cross kick. So this has started last year, and it's still active, and lots of programs coming up. So there's like another graphic. Our biggest flagship program is Deep Demonstration. I can talk for ages about that, but basically what we're doing is like we are teaming up with governments to help and support them in the green transition. We have one in Slovenia currently active, and another one in Ireland coming up. So many more. So that's also a great opportunity to plug in culture creative industries and new European Bauhaus in it. In the meantime, we have several grants where culture creative institutions, startups, individuals can apply. And this is kind of the overview, and very hot off the press, we are going to announce, this is actually, you are the first ones who hear it, because it even has been published yet on our website, even more important. Sign up to our newsletter, because we will announce it. End of this month, we will publish a call for hackathon hosts. So that means like for creative hubs, for universities who can host a hackathon. We have a series of climathons. We adapted, now it's like NEP hackathons. So we are looking for hosts who can run a whole-on climathon with us in September this year. So there will be 6 EU hosts will be picked, and then we run it for 3-4 days. Our climathons are quite substantial, so we have a page for that. Feel free to check it out for research, but that also means, like, for individuals, like, gear up, because there will be within the EIT a new European Bauhaus for Culture and Creative Industries hackathon series. Yes, and there's money, by the way, also. The other one also we just finished was our Ideation Award and our Community Booster, like all finished. But yay, we will do this over and over again. So at the New European Bauhaus Festival, for instance, we applied to participate so we can run our Ideation Awards ceremony, where we are celebrating innovative ideas in the context of green transition in the mindset of the new European Bauhaus. I practiced that this morning. So, the resources we have online already, also, like, I know it's like, UX, still learning. Follow the hashtag on Twitter during the day. I will publish all of the links to all of the information. Feel free to like and retweet. So we have a program with the RMIT Australia together with RMIT Spain, where we published several new European Bauhaus workshops, which are very useful if you want to plug into our program. Follow the money, you know. So, also, if you want to, you know, we are here kind of like to build the bridges. My wonderful boss, Kirsten Dunlop, and we both have a design background. So we kind of like looking for the culture creative industries as agents of change to support our green transition and be our transition narrative partners. You know, policy usually feels a little bit like dry, but it actually can be a lot of fun if you gamify it a little bit. So this is what we are trying to do. So we are also trying to make our work accessible for the culture creative industries. That's what my email. I'm also like on Twitter, as you will notice. So feel free to engage. There is like, again, kind of see us as your green transition WordPress plugin, because we have a lot of material for the last 12 years in context of fighting climate change. On that also is, we actually joined the Pact for Skills as that WordPress plugin, not only for culture creative industries, but like all of our sectors. Just yesterday we talked with our aerospace and defense team. We have a space team inside EIT Climate Kick, which is pretty cool. So I would like to give artists access to our Galileo space data. Wouldn't that be cool? Anyway, see, lots of ideas are there. Thank you so much for the invitation, and I'm looking forward to see you all again very, very soon.
Thank you very much, Lisa. So there's a lot of opportunities coming up. Just one question, the creative kick, because that's, they have to do their, you know, their massive application next week. When will this be really up and running?
Yeah, I think we are all asking. So the thing is, because like a kick is quite a massive undertaking. So there is a lot of operations to behold. From experience with the other kicks, it actually really takes like 1 to 2 years, sometimes 3 years to get up and running operationally. From what I've heard out of the grapevine, it's like the ambition is like to be really hit the ground running and be active like within a year. But that's also why EIT started the cross kick. So like the communities don't have to wait to participate in programs.
Okay, so until then, the question is from you to us. Participate where you can now.
Yeah, it's also get familiar with, you know, this thing called EIT. It's, you know, to say it with the words of the wonderful Ma Rainey, the jazz legend. Here comes a music meme. Jazz is not about, you know, people knowing you. It's about you knowing people. And I think it's a really good definition for policy. So this is about, especially you, culture creative industries, being a new sector. This is about also learning how the system we are in, which yes hasn't been built for you, how it works. So you can plug in, and we are one part of that system.
Yeah. Okay, so I mean, as far as I know, jazz is also knowing about the standards and then improvise.
Exactly. Can we high five on that? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but like that's exactly it. Is because yes, we need standards. You know, in terms of climate change, there are like a lot of standards for sustainability and fight against climate change are actually made. So there is a very much a mechanical process on it. You know, it's like if you learn an instrument, but also like once you understand the mechanics, then you can dance.
Let's
then you
dance.
can orchestrate.
Okay, let's dance and not to orchestrate too much. Okay, thanks very much, Lisa. We're now coming to the end of this part of the program, and I give back the word to Dubravka and I'll give you my mic. And
sorry, my mic got lost in action. But thank you very much. Really inspiring presentations. I think both to Lisa and Brigitte, who joined us online, and it's really a shame she could not be here with us today. Just for the audience watching us online, just for you to know, all the recordings of this morning's sessions will be available later on, also on our website, in case anyone wants to look back, and the presentations will be shared with the participants. So now I think it's what we've been waiting for, the coffee break, the chance to kind of exchange and recap a little bit about what we've heard. And we're supposed to be back in 15 minutes, 1 o'clock, just for our online audience as well, who will be, 12 o'clock, who is waiting for us here online. So we have 15 minutes break, and then we're back for another very interesting panel with very interesting, inspiring speakers. Thank you.
You can continue the discussions after this session, because we have great lineup of speakers waiting for you to share with you. So please. Okay, I guess we'll start, and then hopefully what we're saying will get the attention of everyone. So again, very happy to welcome you here for this session. We'll be speaking about policy perspectives, and we have amazing lineup of speakers with us. Catherine Magnon from the European Commission, Deputy Director and Head of Culture Policy Unit from DG Education, Youth, Sport and Culture. Heidi Meissnitzer, who's the Cultural Attaché in the Permanent Representation of Austria, and she's also a co-chair of Open Method of Coordination EU Member States Expert Group on Working Conditions. So very happy to have you, Heidi. Then Sylvia Amman, who's the Senior Expert of the Creative Flip project and herself also a consultant with Inforelais company. I hope you want the French pronunciation of it, Inforelais. Happy to have you, Sylvia. And last but not least, Gabriele Rosana, who's the Director for Culture Action Europe. So I'm very happy to have you all here. We're going to discuss the policy perspectives of what was already said this morning. We're going to elaborate on some of these points already raised. We'll try to very practically see what we can understand by all these expressions that we've been hearing a lot: bouncing forward, building back better, resilience, and so on. So yeah, very happy to be here with you. I think I will start with Catherine as the representative of the European Commission. Director Tamás Sucs in the morning already spoke about what has been happening on the European Union level to help culture and creative sectors affected by COVID. But I would like to ask you, Catherine, personally and quite subjectively, what do you think were the biggest achievements of some of these measures that were launched? Please go ahead.
Okay, good morning. Good morning, everyone. So pleased to be here with you, and amazing that we can meet physically again. We're not used to that, right? I mean, there is this sense of déjà vu. I mean, I've been here. It was 2 years ago, or more than 2 years ago, and time has passed and has not passed. I mean, it's so strange. And I had even forgotten that at conferences, you get tote bags. When I saw tote bags this morning, I was surprised. Okay, so to come back to your question, Maciek, our biggest achievement, I think for me, has been the rapidity and the multiplicity of the Commission's answer. I will now only speak about, the Commission. We have Heidi who can speak about the experience from a national government, and we have Gabriele, who I'm sure has an opinion on member states. I want to focus on the EU institutions, and the crisis that we went through was a first, of course, for everyone. And I've been impressed by how we have been able to answer fast and again with a whole gamut of instruments. And that made me a bit happy with, our institutions. It's so easy for journalists to speak about bureaucracy and stuff, but actually we put things together quickly. So what did we do? Well, first, easing the state aids, regulation. That allowed national governments, that allowed countries to subsidize as much as they wanted their cultural and creative sectors. And there were hundreds of such subsidies that went through us. We saw them. We, of course, always said yes, of course, no objections. But they went through our desks, so we could see, how impressive they were and how quick they were from all governments and for all or most sectors. Then, of course, that's not the most interesting, but of course, as you know, for Creative Europe, but for all the other programs as well, we managed to, insert a dose of flexibility, extend contracts duration, make amendments. That's boring, right? But yet the machine worked. And adapted to the difficulties that the sectors were facing because they could not perform as usual. And then the new thing that was brought was the Recovery and Resilience Facility. So, there is also a REACT EU, etc. But let's concentrate on the RRF, because That's an innovation. So as you know, it's a mix of grants and loans that was put together extremely quickly by the Commission and the Member States. And let's have a look at what it brings for the cultural and creative sectors. Okay, as you know, there were calls from the Parliament and civil society to reach 2% of national envelopes for the cultural and creative sectors. We know now that those 2% were reached on average. If we take everything together and divide by the number of countries, we reach 2%, but not for each country. Still, it's a huge amount of money for the cultural and creative sectors. It's between 8 billion or 10 billion, depending on how we count. But if you look at, let's put the figures in perspective. So in the next funding period, 2014-2020, under the regional funds, which can fund infrastructure, we calculate that's roughly 6 billion euros went to cultural infrastructures or cultural projects, 6 billion euros, ERDF, the past 7 years. Now, RRF, we have between 8 and 10 billion euros. So you see the magnitude of the figure, and that comes totally on top of everything else, on top of new ERDF money, on top of Creative Europe, whose budget has increased, on top of Cluster 2 in Horizon Europe, where we managed to have 2 billion for culture and the creative sectors. So, okay, maybe it's never enough. Maybe we can look at the glass half empty, but we can also look at the glass half full. And so that would be my, I would like to conclude on that. The multiplicity of the answer, we went fast and we innovated. Yes, possibly we could do things even better, but that's not bad. And I want to finish on one thing and link back to what we heard this morning. What I find extremely interesting in the national plans we received for the RRF is the fact that some measures are there that before COVID, we could not even have dreamed of having, meaning, and I want now to refer to the Austrian initiative of fairness to address the pay gap. Working conditions of artists, pay issues were almost impossible to discuss in a big way before the crisis. I mean, now we can, because of course, because of the suffering, because of what happened, unfortunately, to the sector. But we see a number of countries that take this seriously and much more seriously, and with real experiments or real thinking done. And you see that through the RRF, like the Czech Republic has decided to work on the legal status for artists, and in the RRF, they have set aside 27 million euros to accompany this legal status with funding and grants for skills and other measures. So there are interesting aspects in what we've put together.
Thank you very much, Catherine. I must tell you, of course, I feel very personally strong about your words and some of the things you spoke about. Just to let you know, until autumn last year, I was actually part of the European Commission, and I was for 6 years in the team of Catherine. Now I'm actually representing more the civil society part in the European Cultural Foundation. So I also believe it's very much about these different perspectives that we all have, again, coming from civil society, culture, and creative actors on the ground or different institutions. So that's why I'm also very happy to have all these different perspectives here. And after Catherine, I would like to move to Heidi now. So we already heard this morning about the inspiring process, fairness process happening in Austria. But I would like to ask you more specifically about the insight into the OMC group that you're co-chairing. As I understood, it's your first meeting physically since you started your work last year, right? So maybe you could give us some insight about how the process looked like, because you did start in the middle of COVID, you're continuing your work. What are, let's say, some of the points you could share with us about where you are now and where you want to go, let's say, in coming months?
Okay. Hello also from my side to the audience here and also to the audience online, online audience. I'm very pleased to share this OMC group. I'm sharing it together with Ireland. Unfortunately, Toby couldn't be here. But I'm delighted to give you now an update where we are and what are we expected to come up with. Maybe a few remarks to the OMC process because it's a well-functioning informal working methods on where member states cooperate on jointly identified topics and of shared interest. And under the current work plan of culture, which is the strategic basis on which member states decide to work on, the status of working conditions, the status of artists and working conditions was identified as one of the priorities. And as Catherine already mentioned, there is a political momentum for this topic, and it is receiving highly topical attention, not only from our side, but also in many other institutions, also from the European Council, UNESCO, but also from the stakeholder sides. And the initiatives are also going on in the European Parliament, which we are following on, of course. So the basis for us is a mandate. It's also important that it was worked out by the Commission and then adopted by member states and discussed by member states. So there was already quite a very good input and a very good basis. Before the mandate, the Commission launched a study which gives us also a lot of qualified input and data on this topic. So we are expecting to come up with a report. We have approximately 1.5 years. So we started in last September, and as it was mentioned, unfortunately, it was still under COVID circumstancing, so we couldn't until now we couldn't meet in person, but we had 3 online meetings. But what I also can say that the importance of this topic is also reflected in the fact that 27 member states have committed to participate, and not only from, most of them from the experts are coming from the cultural ministries, but some of them are also from the social and labor ministries, which is an added value, I would say, to this topic, not to reflect on it from the cultural side, but really also from the social and labor expertise. So we had so far 3 meetings, and as the topic is quite complex and the issue as such is a transversal issue, so we have to coordinate with some other policy areas and also with the stakeholder sectors, what's going on the European level, but also on an international level. And many initiatives are underway in the member states, and of course this is due to the fact and the response to the crisis. We have now split it up in our last meeting. In our 3rd meeting, we split it up in 6 subgroups where we will now focus on. And so the first one, I hope I have certainly in mind. So one of important sub-area is the status of artists and how it is defined, who is part of or who could be defined as an artist, and what initiatives and approaches are already applied in member states. There is also we have heard it from the European Parliament. They are interested in a European framework for a status on artists. Then another important issue is, of course, how to finance the financing and regulatory issues. Then we are very much dealing with the social protection systems and how they are also financed, what's going on there. Then we have a subgroup on skills and some on another one which is on the artistic freedom. We invited already some, of course, external speakers, and we are working with other relevant DGs in the Commission together. And we had some presentations of good practices. One, of course, was the Austrian one. And but we are still looking for member states are invited to come up with also other initiatives, ongoing initiatives. The Fair Practice Code from the Netherlands was already mentioned, and Austria was very much inspired by that. But we also had on the welfare, on a social protection system from Germany on the federal level, and very inspiring project. And also from the co-chair from Ireland, there is a pilot project on a basic income for artists, and they are still struggling with clarification of quite a lot of questions where we are also working on it, but it's interesting to following up this project. And Luxembourg presented an initiative which is mainly only for artists, because we have a broader perspective, and with also the cultural and the creative professionals. And interesting is always where's the money coming from, and certainly the cultural budgets are, on the longer perspective, it's not enough. And so we have to look for ideas and initiatives where the money can come from. I would also like to mention that in a few member states, social reform programs are underway within the Recovery and Resilience funds, which might also be inspiring for our groups. So after 3 meetings, and I mentioned that 27 member states altogether, we are more than 40 experts, and I can say there's a very good working spirit, and experts are really committed, and I'm very optimistic that we come up with a good and final report, and I'm very happy that some of the experts are also here and could make it to Brussels. And
much, Heidi. I think it might be the first time ever in this open method of coordination process that we have an expert group working on such a hot topic, actually also witnessing parts of this difficult reality unraveling in front of our eyes. So again, thank you very much for your work, and yeah, I'm happy to know that also some of these experts are today with us in Brussels. Now I'd like to go to the civil society and to Gabriele. So Gabriele, what we were just talking about, it's part of the daily bread of Culture Action Europe, if I may say so. I'm sure that the topic of working conditions has been on your agenda probably long before COVID. It's probably even more now. I would like to ask you, what are your expectations? How do you assess actually the progress being made on the EU level? What are your wishes? What are your expectations? What you hope for? Maybe you have also some comments to what we heard from Catherine and Heidi.
Thank you, Maciej. Indeed, it's our daily bread, and it's a bread for all tastes, from pumpkin seeds to turmeric, if I may say so. Given the wide range of topics we deal with at Culture Action Europe, first and foremost, also I would like to thank Creative Flip for giving us the chance to be finally off screen after 2 years, to reconnect with familiar faces. Culture Action Europe is a European cultural network, is the major European cross-sectorial cultural network, and I think it goes without saying that also seeing it from the perspective of a network, this is precisely one of the key conditions to build back better, or to bounce forward, to use indeed the buzzwords chosen by the Creative Flip project. It's indeed inspiring to speak after Catherine and Heidi, and after also having heard updates on the process at the OMC group. I was lucky enough to join, also to participate in part to one of its meetings together with Elena Politseva from ITM. We presented also the Voices of Culture report precisely on the topic of working conditions of artists, and some policy recommendations stemming from that process. first one comment indeed on what Catherine was saying. I mean, we've seen 2 years after the outbreak of the pandemic, I think also seeing it from the civil society, we have to commend the actions that has been, the unprecedented action that has been done by the European Union institutions. The very first time we have seen, and I think that indeed as European political actors ourselves, we have to recognize that the first time that we have seen an ambitious fiscal solidarity put in place by the EU member states, led by the EU institutions. On the topic on working conditions, also building on some of the suggestions, well, from before, from the Austrian case and from what Heidi was saying, it has always been a priority for Culture Action Europe, and I tend to describe this as a Karsic river, because, I mean, it was a topic that has always been there. I mean, the European Parliament, last time it voted a resolution on this topic, it was 2007. It was a whole other world. It was before even the Lehman Brothers bankrupt and before several other crises that we have been confronted with. The topic has always been among our priorities, and it is even more now. Of course, as we have heard also from the words of Sabine Verheyen, the increasing attention for the topic has been linked to the pandemic. We know, I mean, last year we've heard the figures of how much the pandemic, probably we didn't really need figures, we all knew that already, but the figures, of course, indicators help in that, how much the pandemic has impacted the culture and creative sectors. It's absolutely urgent then that this topic stays in the political agenda, and I mean, I think we are seeing already a sort of more ambition also in the way we are openly speaking about the subject. We are openly speaking with the Parliament has overwhelmingly endorsed the proposal for a European status of the artist. But of course we acknowledge it's a cross-cutting issue. It's an issue that brings together culture and social affairs and social issues, so it's very much important that that the discussion itself is happening, bringing together both expertise and bridging between the two fields. What the OMC can do, what it's doing, what I'm happy can also steer the debate and provide guidance on precisely the issue of the definitions, and also identifying the perimeter of the action of the EU on this topic. We, of course, are not blind to that. We are speaking of two domains that are not falling under the very primary competences of the European Union, but at the same time, especially considering the non-standard forms of employment that we see in the culture and creative sector, a sector that is highly mobile, that employ a lot of freelancers, and considering the specificity also of the labor intensity of the artistic work, we believe that this discussion should happen, and as it is happening at the European level, in order to rebalance indeed a sector that has been more and more constrained in a project-based and output-driven environments, and that probably we believe deserves regulatory quantum leap also to take into account all that makes the cultural employment, which is indeed not just the cultural output, but also let's think about all the research and everything that comes before that as well. Two more comments reacting on your question, what we do expect and how we do expect that to happen. In 1 year ago, we contributed to the political process in the European Parliament, in the Cult Committee, by developing, together with the researcher Mafalda Damaso, some policy recommendations, indeed binding legislative and non-legislative tools, medium and long-term perspectives on what a European framework for the status of the artist should be, going from the digital environment, from topics like buyout contracts to lifelong learning, and setting minimum requirements, minimum standards for a truly European status of the artist. There was one topic, it was the first topic that Catherine mentioned. It was mentioned also before during another presentation, that of state aid. And And the big shift that we are seeing in competition law at the European Union level, it used to be a rock-solid reserve of action for the European Union institutions. We are now seeing, and we are very much looking forward to seeing also the developments on how collective bargaining for self-employed people can be finally put in a European framework, and what guidance can be given to the member states to finally enable that. One last thing then on how to do that. Well, on the work plan for culture, we've heard that from the next work plan for culture. We've heard that from the French presidency of the Council. We believe this topic should stay in the next work plan for culture, and actually also seeing some more improvements in that hand. And on the other hand, on the political agenda, I think some good old dose of peer pressure is there to be welcomed. Catherine was mentioning Czech Republic. There is also Spain that has put the working conditions in its own recovery fund, recovery and resilience plan. At Culture Action Europe, we have done some monitoring, not only of the money, because that's just part of the picture, but indeed of the lines of actions that are included, relevant for culture, that are included in the 26 or those of the 26 plans already presented that prioritize culture. Indeed, there are examples already there, and a benchmarking exercise starting from what is happening at the member states level can provide additional food for thought for building a European framework or a European status of the artist, if I can use the words of the Parliament.
Gabriele. We'll get to the work plan for culture also in a minute, but before we do that, to address a question to Sylvia specifically, namely on the buzz quite resilience used. I know creative flip. I'm not sure. I hope my microphone is. Seems to be some interruptions. We can share. That's a nice thing. I wanted to ask you the word resilience. I heard that in your community of practice of Creative Flip, you prefer to use the term of positive transformations. Maybe you could tell us more about that and how you see that transformation happening. And with this, we'll progress to discussing the future too in a second.
Thank you, Maciej. This is a longer story. First of all, I'm very happy to be again with you all after these 2 years, and this links directly to the topic, because in Creative Flip, we reacted immediately to the new situation already in 2020. The one big project you all know is Creative Unite. The second thing we did was maybe not so visible, but we analyzed from the very beginning policy reaction to the pandemic. And we had a first paper already published in July 2020, where we've had a closer look to the immediate response from EU level and also from the member state level. And then in a follow-up study, this was outside Flip, but with some of the Flip partners, we did a study for the European Parliament on COVID-19 effects and also related policy recommendations. And then we reacted again in Flip with an additional analysis of the more innovative, innovation-related papers from mainly member states, but also from private initiatives. So in order to use momentum of the crisis also to innovate and to go further. So based on all that, we can already say that, and here I react also on what all my colleagues here on the panel have already stated, that the immediate reaction, the emergency response was great. Yeah, so also unexpected, and also in the dimensions we have seen, and also in the length of being able to provide again and again support programs, again and again support measures. But what is always interesting in these times of crisis, of course, and this is your business as policymakers, you need to react immediately, you need to respond to an emergency, this is completely clear. We in Flip, we have the privilege to think also broader. And we see that also as our role in order to further reflect. And what can we learn now from this crisis, but also for other crises in the mid and long term? And in that context came up also this term of resilience, because all the time when then conferences took place, it was about the sector has to become more resilient. It's so important that we focus on resilience, and we started then this autumn with a reflection about resilience. And of course, if you dig deeper, you see that this is a complex thing. There is a lot of research also outside the cultural and creative sectors. And then we started also with a participatory process this January in order to reflect a little bit further. Is this really the right response? Should we now, out of a crisis, vein the force of resilience of the sector? And I think Gabriele mentioned already that we are having these non-standard workers, for example, in the cultural and creative industries. And we had this narrative in culture that we can generate growth and we can generate jobs, and we can that. That's proven, we have the statistics, we can that. But the question is also for what price? It's also that, of course, we at the same time stressed always the fact that our workers are very flexible. And this is the other side of a non-standard worker. It's a very flexible worker. But what about then the rights of this very flexible worker? And this came very clearly on the table. So during this pandemic, for example. But this means also that in that sense, we have to think further. And therefore, this made me then rather reflecting into a direction that maybe an overall narrative of resilience might not be the best answer for going out of the crisis. Maybe this concept of resilience, or maybe then also of sustainability, is much more valid on a more operational level. So to think what are maybe appropriate tools which we use, kind of institutions becoming more resilient, but maybe also to further empower people instead of making them more resilient, because this is a different story. Yeah? Resilient means you are able to absorb each and every shock which is imposed to you. An empowered person is maybe someone who can also act proactively and then also work for the future. And this brings me to the next thing, because when we are in such crisis, we understand then somehow better that maybe what we have thought, achieved, or for granted is maybe not. And in that sense, I have the feeling that we have now a growing understanding that we are rather in a permanent transformation. First, we thought, especially in Europe, we are in very fixed frameworks. We are in structures which will remain the same forever. And now we learn, not only by the pandemic, but also by the recent events now in the last weeks, nothing is for granted. Things change all the time. It was a kind of false dream we had in Europe to think that we are in a safe space. It's not the case. So therefore, maybe also to learn now out of this crisis and of this experience to understand that we are always in transformation, sometimes in more rapid, sometimes in slower transformation, but maybe that our systems need to become transformation ready. Yeah? And then also to think, how do they do that? And this is also what we discuss now in the framework of FLIP.
Thank you very much, Silvia. Now we try to jump into the future a bit, and yeah, the talk of the town, Work Plan for Culture 2023-2026 of the Council, at least for some of us. So Heidi, what can you tell us? I mean, I know you're discussing with your Culture Affairs Committee colleagues. We heard from the French representative this morning on that. If you can give us some insight, that would be great too.
Yeah. Is it working? No? Yeah, it's working. Yeah, the current work plan is now coming to an end, and I think the Commission and Catherine will agree that it was really very intensive. But we also have to say that we have identified the right priorities, yeah? And I think we can all be very proud. And I would highlight a little bit the process, how it was developed, the current work plan, because I think, and this is shown by many initiatives when we are talking now in the cultural area, how important it is to work together and to involve all the main actors, yeah, from different areas, from different levels, and really to cooperate and to work together. And this we did, the current work plan was negotiated under the Austrian presidency, and we did it by a participatory method. And I hope it will be done also by the next and future presidency. But we were lucky because we convinced our authorities and we could organize an informal meeting. Yeah, and this is not, of course, depending on if you get the resources for it. And for the current work plan is already evaluated, and I think it's also the relevance or how member states feel committed to the work plan is that 27 member states took part in questionnaires, and we got already a first feedback, which was very encouraging. And so that we have chosen the right priorities. I think there was also an agreement that the working methods are still the right ones, and there are already new ideas or some good ideas what should be what could be topics of future challenges, for example, cultural diversity in the digital area. I had the pleasure also to chair an OMC group on gender equality. I think this is still an issue, and especially with an intersectional perspective, and also taking into account digitization. I think the whole topic of digitization is something, but it came up. And as Sylvia mentioned, I think we should also still reflect on what the COVID crisis has shown us. There is a lot in it. So I'm very optimistic because the motivation and ambitions are high in the Council. Member states are really interested, and the work plan for culture is the right instrument, and also an OMC is the right instrument. Maybe what we should also focus more on is how to distribute all this expertise, because there's really very good reports on the tables, and this should be known, this should be used, this should be by policymakers considered, and so I hope that the Commission, maybe Catherine will add a little bit more, but the Commission is expected to come up with a more detailed feedback in June, and maybe France will start. And but the Czech Republic, the upcoming presidency, has to finalize it, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion of a new work plan.
I mean, the expectations are also high, so I hope the ambitions and expectations will meet. And of course, there are more and more challenges. Catherine, speaking about things that maybe did not work that well, or maybe the gaps that there still exist for European Union actions, what can you tell us? What's in store for the Commission for the next few months and years in your planning?
Okay, so I actually wanted to comment on the work plan for culture, but as Catherine, not as a commission, because we are a collective body, and you know, I'm a civil servant, so things have to be agreed, you know, and and validated before being transmitted officially. So we haven't reached that stage yet. We haven't had the opportunity to speak with our commissioner yet regarding, what we could propose. So I'm now speaking as myself. So no tweets, please. It's an entirely personal reflection, but I think, it was extremely useful to sit together today, and I see a mix of, I see two directions. One direction are the challenges that culture and the cultural and creative sectors have been facing for the past 10 years and that all work plans have addressed so far. Digitization, skills, funding, new business models, gender equality, that remains, yeah? But it was developed quite a lot in the previous work plans for culture. And there is a new line of thinking and a new line of possible actions to be pursued is how do we adapt our policies and thinking to the new crisis? And the crisis has been the COVID, that has been the permanent crisis of the climate change, and now the war in Ukraine. Three major it's not events, it's like, systemic transformation that have an impact on our personal lives, and maybe we should take into account when reflecting on the future of cultural policies. So if we look at COVID and lockdown, it's of course the working conditions of artists, and I think that should remain really something we work on, absolutely. And I thought it was very interesting, Sylvia, to hear you. Is it better like that? I can hear myself. No? No? Is it okay? Sylvia, what you said, we should reflect on a permanent adaptation in a way. We will always be in crisis. There is, and I think it's so true, there is no stability to be expected anymore. There is more, all those crises, but also the freelancing, the destructuration in a way of the workplace. All that is very important. So that points to a sort of social direction, right? Social policies or employment policies. Plus près? Okay. It also speaks to cultural policies and mental health and well-being, right? Because we all rediscovered that we cannot feel good without culture during the lockdown, right? Without reading films, listening to music, reading books, etc. So there is a lot to be deepened on the relationship between culture and well-being, culture and health. And now with the war in Ukraine, culture and trauma, we know that you have different tools, you have psychological therapy, but you also have therapy through arts, which apparently gives longer-term results, more sustainable results. So that could be one line of thinking. Then we've got the climate change. Here there are two aspects. There is the mentality aspects. Art and culture can help us digest changes and adapt to new thinking, new mentalities, new ways of doing, new ways of living. So there is that. And then the general aspect. But then there is also climate change impact on some sectors like cultural heritage. We are not ready, we are not ready to protect our cultural heritage from floods, our coastlines from, the sea rising. So much remains to be done in terms of being prepared. And then there is the war in Ukraine. What does it say with regard to our values? What does it say with regard to information, fake news, but also, arts can also contribute to telling a story, telling a narrative. So there is so much we have to think about of possible new directions because our world is changing and has changed drastically. So I see a mix of, not all things, but, structural things like digitization, of course, and skills. Of course, it continues. But at the same time, we have to take on board all these new dimensions. So, but again, speaking as myself, nothing is validated. We haven't had the official, process, because all what I'm saying is is just too much. We won't be able to tackle everything. So it will be a difficult prioritization exercise. And just to finish, sorry, with regard to your first question, what worked, what didn't work in our response? Of course, only time will tell, right? What were the right measures? And I think that's where civil society, our projects, and the academics as well are very needed to analyze, tell us what worked, what didn't work. Because, you know, it's one thing to list measures and mention figures, and it's another one to analyze the reality. And we don't have that yet because we need time, basically. We need things to unfold in reality, but we will need your analysis, very important.
Okay. Thank you very much, Catherine. And yeah, we're taking note that it's some of these personal thoughts, so we're even more grateful to have you here in this Creative Flip family. Now going to Gabriele and to what Heidi said earlier, about the importance of certain top-down processes, bottom-up processes, and listening to the voices from the sector. How do you make sure that civil society is properly included in the discussions on these future priorities? And with this, of course, I would be very happy to link to the Cultural Deal for Europe campaign and movement that Culture Action Europe, together with European Culture Foundation and Europa Nostra, are pioneering. What do you see as a future for that initiative and some kind of timeline? We'll very much welcome your thoughts on some of these points.
Thank you, Maciej, indeed. Thank you also for asking me to speak about a bit of the Cultural Deal for Europe. I mean, we have heard a lot speaking until now about transformation and the adaptability for reacting to a changing world. I mean, not even speak of crisis, but rapidly changing world. I think that the Cultural Deal for Europe that we presented, indeed, together with the European Cultural Foundation and Europa Nostra, also in its capacity of coordinator of the European Heritage Alliance, we came together. We came together, we sat around, at the time was a digital table. Luckily enough, we are going to sit around a physical table very soon with our partners to indeed strategize for the future. But we sat around a digital table at the very beginning of the pandemic to indeed think of what a paradigm shift should entail for bouncing forward. Indeed, that is the slogan also of today's conference, for bouncing forward, what we need. For sure, what we need, and I connect with the first part of your question, is listening to the voices of the cultural and creative sectors. 1.5 months ago, we had our policy conversation of the Cultural Deal for Europe, where indeed we asked our participants, around 800 participants, unfortunately only online at the time, connected. We asked, what would you see included in the next work plan for culture? We really believe that the next work plan for culture, I mean, it can be very much bureaucratic or technical, the slogan, the procedure, but we really believe it's the way to also to make cultural policy alive in the European political debate, and we want to contribute to that process. So we think really that the next stop for the Cultural Deal EU is really identifying those priorities that we urgently want to see featured in the next in the roadmap for European cultural policy for the next 4 years. And I'm very happy about the priorities that I've heard identified by private citizens, Catherine, if I can say so. So let's see how the process evolves. But indeed, the Cultural Deal EU has been at the very beginning very much focused on the recovery and also the economic recovery from the crisis. I mentioned before the mapping that also thanks to the members of the network of Culture Action Europe we have developed a few months ago on the national recovery and resilience plans, taking into account indeed the plans, and both the EU, the major EU funding and the national co-funding were provided. But at the same time, we saw something. I mean, the institutions, the Commission, also the Parliament, from time to time, like to say that the culture and creative sectors do not come together, do not do things together. Well, during the pandemic, we've set up a an informal gathering, which is still happening, which is more than 110 cultural organizations that indeed came together to think about the future of cultural policies in Europe, and we have done several initiatives together. The question of sustainability is very much crucial to the cultural deal EU, both sustainability of the cultural practices, of the production models, and the cultural sector itself, as well as, democracy, the discussion about European values, especially even more pressing now in a war-torn Europe, where indeed, and I'm happy to see that Creative Flip and Creatives Unite has opened up a page where indeed the culture and creative organizations, we are seeing every day several of our members, our partners, asking for pooling resources and tools useful for the for Ukrainian artists, for artists at risk in general coming to Europe. So I'm happy that Creatives Unite can act as that platform. As you speak of timeline, indeed, Maciej, I said already the work plan for culture is going to be probably our main slice of the cake for 2022. But the campaign, the Cultural Deal campaign, let's not forget about that, was born in 2019. It was born in the very days, let's say, what came before the Cultural Deal was born, so also the partnership with the European Cultural Foundation and Europa Nostra was born at the very days of 2019 when a new commission didn't have a commissioner for culture. There was the campaign of Bring Back Culture, Madam President, that was successful. Then we had culture explicitly included in the title of Commissioner Gabriel. Well, so probably the next step, I would say, more medium term, is going to be in exactly 2 years' time, when in the run-up to the next European Parliament elections, to assess how much culture has been included at the center of EU policy making and what needs to be done in with a new mandate, with the next commission. But the issue here is, and just a reading tip also for our audience, indeed, to mainstream culture across all the policies. This has been a long-standing slogan of Culture Action Europe, mainstream culture across the policy priorities of the Commission. And in that, I'm happy that indeed also valuable experts as Gijs de Vries has contributed to the Cultural Deal EU with his policy recommendations on how to indeed include culture in all the 6 political axes that the von der Leyen Commission has also for the next 2 years. And then it will be time to assess and rethink and readapt. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gabriele. And now to Silvia. We spoke about predicting the future. We spoke about working across the sectors. We had a very inspiring presentation also this morning from Lisa about knowledge and innovation communities. But I wanted to ask you very specifically about this foresight and forecasting, because how much can we really predict? Maybe there's a way also for culture and creative sectors that they can play a role in predicting that future. I don't know if this is something that you've been reflecting about, or maybe Creative Flip has been reflecting about.
As you know, this was part of our reflections also. So we referred then when discussing or analyzing this resilience debate, also you must be resilient then for what? And immediately you come to what other crises beyond the pandemic can happen. And then you end up with foresight papers. And then you start to reflect what has this to do with our sector. And so I think when we had a look at these foresight scenarios, it was not really a surprise, and it felt also not like an academic exercise. It felt as papers which were done seriously. And I've already used another foresight paper from 2017 for my first flip paper in 2020. So in that sense, European Commission tries to see the future for already quite a while. And you find what has happened. So in that sense, it seems that to a certain extent, you can at least predict or foresee scenarios, different scenarios. You cannot foresee that on 24th of February we will have an invasion to the Ukraine. But what we know for a very long time is that we are having a rapidly changing geopolitical context. And when we know that, for example, and then it's also your question, what matters that for culture? Of course, we, for example, concentrated many years on mobility programs. This is very nice, but if we are having more and more refugee artists, maybe we need an additional kind of initiative. And if we have a look at the foresight scenarios, we will know that we will have much more refugees. So this brings maybe a completely different topic onto the agenda. We can also see it from the other side. It depends on which foresight scenario you are looking at. Of course, you mentioned also before the climate change, and we had this presentation from the climate kick. So in climate change or ecological transformation, I've just published a paper on ecological cultural policy. It has, again, several sides, yeah? So you can see it as a big opportunity also for culture, because I do not see another way than the arts, for example, to reconnect people with nature. But if you want to have a new kind of understanding of how a human being is living on Earth, which is needed for really achieve a climate change, you need this new kind of way to interact with nature. And this is a big opportunity for the whole arts and cultural sector in order to go ahead. So in all these kind of future transformation, future does not always mean future crisis. It means transformation, and it has opportunities and it has challenges. And if we go ahead with that, it's, I think, a good way forward, maybe also for a new cultural policy, to think also in these dimensions, maybe with a kind of overarching ambition to be relevant for the society, to be one of the positive enablers and actors of the world and society in which we are living. And then it's also not a question about instrumentalization. It's being part of the game, of working together for a better future. And we have to co-define what is the better future. And then we are coming to values and to guiding principles, etc.
We can live with that as a bit of a conclusion, opportunities and challenges, because it's relatively positive. I'm now looking at Dubravka because I know we're a bit out of time, but this is where we normally foresaw some time for your questions. I don't know, Dubravka, what shall we do? Maybe we can have some, I don't know, 3 comments from your side. I'm happy to go around to the microphone and just give you the floor like that, because I couldn't really see you before with that light. So if there anyone willing to comment? Are you all that hungry? Come on, you need to give us something. We want to see a live audience. This is something we've been all missing, right? Yeah. Otherwise we go for lunch and you discuss that over lunch, but yeah. I see some heads nodding. Huh? Okay, so, so that's good. Thank you very much for the speakers. A round of applause and enjoy your lunch.
Yes, I think we kind of caught everyone by surprise. Everyone, I think, is not used to anymore having the opportunity to raise their hand and ask the question, so that's totally fine. Luckily, we are here in person, so the speakers are here. You can ask them during lunch and, of course, continue the debate. With this, I just want to say goodbye to our online audience who has been following us since this morning. To this afternoon, we're going to maximize this exchange. We're going to go into small live groups and discuss, and the conclusions from this parallel sessions will be recorded and will be then later available on the Creative Flip website. So we'll, of course, make sure to spread the word about this as soon as it's up online through our social media channels. So make sure to follow us. So as I said, this is goodbye to the audience online. For the audience here, I still have a few more things, just very, very brief technical instructions. So for one thing, as you know, we are going to go into parallel sessions this afternoon. You've all marked your preference during the registration. We've tried to respect your wishes as much as possible, but due to limited space, we had to adapt a little bit. So on your badge, you have a little dot, most of you, which indicates the room that you're supposed to go to. So we have 3 sessions this afternoon. One on crossing sectors for positive transformation will take place for 2 hours.